Thank you all so much for coming to today's workshop. I am so excited for you to hear from Megan and LouAnne. And in just a minute, they're going to share with you a little bit about who they are and their background. They are just phenomenal. We are so excited to be able to do coach-led workshops. And so what that means is that LouAnne and Megan have created the program for today, the curriculum for today. So if you have any questions after this workshop or want to get connected with them or even have a referral or anything for them, they're going to be the best people to connect with and collaborate with. LouAnne and Megan, I'll go ahead and I'm going to pass it to you. I cannot wait to learn from you today. I'm so excited for this.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. And while I go to share my screen, I'm going to put a question in the chat for those of you who are here that you'll see on the screen in a minute. But it's somewhat rhetorical, but if you feel like you would like to give us an answer and some background, why do educators need you as their coach is our question. So we're sort of wondering, you saw the description and you came here today. Why might educators benefit from your particular coaching brand and style is our question. So it's kind of our guiding question for the whole session today for those who are watching and those who are here. So what we want to really do is connect your coaching philosophy and what you already know as a coach to this idea of educators who need us, educators that we want to thrive for so many different reasons, either because you're a parent or you have nieces and nephews or because you have grandchildren or just people in your life that you care about. You want your heart surgeon one day to be pretty good at what they do, or you just want kids to be smiling and happy in the world. So there's many reasons for that, but we'd love to know what you think as a coach you can bring to this audience. And that's what we're going to kind of try to draw out today as we go. So LouAnne and I will introduce ourselves, but we wanted to sort of set up with you introducing yourself in that way for us as we go forward. So today's session is going to be specifically talking about educators and how they are helpers. So LouAnne and I have been talking a lot lately about the educators that are right in front of children and how they sort of are first responders to the children in the world. And I say children, and that could mean an 18-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 2-year-old, anybody that's being taught is sort of representing this future generation. And for whatever reason that it matters to you, that future generation matters for all of us. So we'd like to think about this sort of metaphor of the helpers, the people who charge into the situation when things are going wrong. And, you might have heard that famous Mr. Rogers quote about his mother when there was this tragedy. And he said, look for the helpers, the people who are going towards the disaster. And it makes you feel hopeful. We're going to talk a lot about hope today and how educators are sort of the first responders to that future generation. And they need our care and our attention, similarly to how an emergency room doctor or a police officer or a firefighter can't be in emergency mode all the time. They need love and care and a lot of support in order to thrive and meet those needs. So a couple of different key moments in this presentation, we're going to be talking about this concept of sustainability. And not environmental sustainability like we normally think of that term, but sustainability with the definition of meeting the needs of the current generation without compromising the needs of future generations. So we're really thinking about this idea of how do we help teachers now in a way that is sustainable, that's going to move them forward and to continue to create this thriving next generation. It's a timeless question, one we'll never not have to think about, one we've never not had to think about. So it's something that all of us can have sort of in our minds, but particularly coaches who are looking to help. So basically, we're going to touch on three things today in order to understand the needs and wants of these so-called first responders. So LouAnne and I are privileged to work directly with educators, and we're pretty keenly aware of those educator pain points. So we're going to spend a little time at the beginning just talking about some of the things that we know are patterns with educators right now, things that they're feeling, experiencing that might be coachable, things that they might be able to actually move forward with your support and help as a coach. So we'll talk about how to market and support educators through life coaching. We're also going to talk about some high leverage coaching tools that you may or may not already have in your toolkit. So we're going to be talking about a particular tool, Ikigai, which you saw in the description, but also touching base on a lot of your coach training EDU tools. There's many, many things that we use to support those pain points with educators that you likely have in your toolkit already. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how you can connect with educators within your sphere of influence. How do you find them? How do you support them? How do you build a coaching practice that includes perhaps coaching educators? Before we do that, we wanted to answer the question, why do educators need us as their coach? So I'm going to introduce myself and then allow LouAnne to do that. And if you do want to at this point, you can answer that in the chat or be thinking about it if you're watching this back. But basically, my experience as an educator is really focused right now on a kind of freelance sort of atmosphere. So you think about like the gig economy, but for educators. So as a freelance educator, I'm not tied to any school or organization, but I get to work with educators all over the place across the country in lots of different ways. Educators who are retired, pre-service, meaning they're not teaching yet, but they're in a program to become a teacher, all across the spectrum. So with that breadth, I get to have a lot of touch points with many, many different educators, which then allows me to kind of find patterns. And while a lot of the pain points we're going to be talking about today are painful, really, really painful, my job as a coach is to generate hope for those educators, a sense of you're in this together. There's stuff that you can do to take control over your own health and well-being, even if the system feels like it's insurmountable. So in my answer to the question, why do educators need me as their coach? A lot of times in that general pattern of breadth, I can find things that they can't see in their smaller little window that can open their eyes to there are other people out here working on this alongside you, even if you don't know that they are. So I have been everything from a classroom teacher to a community partnerships coordinator to a professional developer to many different things. But one of the parts of being an educator that I'm most proud of is my coaching business and working with teachers as a life coach. LouAnne, do you want to go ahead and share about yourself?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm LouAnne Metzger, and here's why educators need me as a coach. I'm a recovering advice giver, and that's good because educators deserve the freedom to do what they believe is right for kids. In June of 2021, I retired from public education after a little over 3 decades of the best years of my life. I love being a teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal. Mostly. What I didn't like, though, was the lack of autonomy and the freedom to be creative and innovative to do my best in service of future ready kids. So during retirement, as one who loves to learn and help others, I decided to go back to school. A year ago this month, I entered the 1.0 Academic Life Coach program through CTEDU. And as of this morning, I completed the 2.0 advanced program and passed. And I'm currently coaching teachers, instructional coaches, and administrators. And as an aside, I chose Coach Training EDU because of their global focus and alignment with my belief that if we desire a kinder, sustainable, and more equitable future, we need to focus on attending to the well-being of the adults who serve our kids. So my focus is to liberate educators to create a more sustainable future. And for me, becoming a life coach has been such a game changer personally and professionally. I wish I knew all of this whenever I was an administrator, especially. So thankfully, it's inspired me and reinvigorated me that I'm actually back in the school setting. I'm serving as a substitute principal at an elementary school. I've been here since January, and I'll be here until the last day on June. And so excited to put my skills into practice inside a school building. It's just been awesome. And so, Megan, we can go to the next slide. Over my career, and especially during the pandemic, I noticed that students increasingly and sadly see school as irrelevant and feel a sense of hopelessness about the future. As a result, students are very different than when I was younger, and the educators serving them are struggling to meet their needs academically, socially, and emotionally. And this has taken a gigantic toll on our educators. And to help educators with this heavy lift, they need and deserve space to think about who they are, who they want to be, what they desire to learn, as well as support identifying what goals and pathways will get them there. When this happens, their work life will be positively impacted. Jim Knight, the Marshall Goldsmith of educational coaching, states it well. I have concluded that recognizing and honoring teacher autonomy is an essential and fundamental part of effective coaching. So, hope theory, as our foundation for the CTEDU training, is what makes this type of coaching especially effective for educators. And according to Gwen and Hellman, hope is the idea that you have goals you desire to achieve, and you can identify pathways towards those goals, and you can direct yourself, which is the agency, towards the goal and pathways necessary to reach those goals. So, by tapping into a teacher's agency and exploring their pathways to reach the goals they set for themselves, will be novel for most educators, yet necessary because hopeful employees tend to be more helpful. They are more likely to be engaged, and they approach new tasks with vigor and have higher job level satisfaction. The research also says that hopeful people live more fulfilled lives, experience less burnout, and are likely to persist when facing obstacles. So, I want to give you a heads up as you place emphasis on questions that focus on the learn, be, do cycle. Some educators may feel uncomfortable and actually may struggle to focus on themselves. They're so other centered, they struggle to look inside themselves. I really encourage you to follow through with your CTEDU training, meet them where they are, lean into the 3 trusts, trust the educator, trust yourself, and trust the strategy. I've learned it works, and it will help them as you build the safe environment to be themselves and explore their pathways and goals. It will help them set more complex goals, and they'll get better at critical thinking and problem solving that is associated with these pathway dimensions of hope. So I'm super excited when I think about educators following this pathway and then the likelihood of them passing this hope on to their students.
Yeah, and but to the point of the first responder metaphor, LouAnne and I both happen to be married to retired firefighters. That idea of helping the helper can be very uncomfortable for the helper. They don't really understand or feel like they deserve that help. And so we do find that educators are one of the slower audiences to warm up to coaching, to even come to coaching in the first place, let alone be coached. So there is a bit of a curve that they have to get over to sort of feel that they're worthy of that. And hope is a great ingredient to give them that sense and that external focus. If you're hopeful, by extension, your students will be hopeful. So that's why that hope theory kind of has a double benefit to the teacher and then everybody they touch from there.
Yeah. And if I might add, before this one, just real quickly, educators also are very, very used to being told what to do. And the coaching models in schools now are advice giving. So that's why I'm a reformed advice giver. And so just know that going in, they will lean into you and want you to give advice. Resist that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And LouAnne and I both went round and round about that in our training to say, but they're asking for advice. Should I give them advice? This is what I know I have advice. Should I give advice? And we kind of had to grow through that and really lean in and trust the process to realize it was much more beneficial to let the client help themselves than to step in when they are even begging you to do so. And part of the reason they're asking for that help is because they need it very badly. We are experiencing societal pain, but teachers are bearing a large brunt of it. You know, you hear about all the different spheres of the world and who is kind of experiencing this lack of energy, time, feeling of well-being. Teachers are at the top of the list of some of the highest levels of burnout. But also we're in a very dangerous time right now that LouAnne could probably speak to even more, which is it's becoming normal in education circles for burnout to be the condition with which they just live. It's so ubiquitous that it's almost invisible at this point. And so the culture of burnout is very strong in our schools right now. There is a general lack of time and energy that is acknowledged and also accepted. that people say this is just how it is and what we have to do, that existed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, rose with it, and then never came back down again. So we continued to normalize lack of time and energy for teaching, and now lack of time and energy for life. So educators report lack of time for exercise, meaningful connections with friends, time with their family, all kinds of different factors that actually restored their energy for teaching in previous times, that they just don't have that refill, that refuel that they used to, because that lack of time and energy in their professional lives is creeping into their personal life. So while LouAnne and I have often been positioned professionally as helping teachers with teaching, one of the reasons we both are drawn to life coaching is because we see those outer edges that are not the responsibility of an institution like a public school or university. They're not directly responsible for thriving life, but thriving life makes for better teaching. And it also models for children what a good life looks like. They're looking to the adults in their life to say, what is my future going to look like? And if the people that are closest to them that they see every day are burned out, they believe that burnout is normal, just like everybody is accepting. And so it's incredibly important not just to take care of our teachers in this way, but also for kids to see thriving in front of them, or they won't know what it looks like. And they won't believe us when we say, here's what you need for a thriving life, because the question right behind that for any child with any level of understanding is going to be, but wait, you're saying this and you're showing me this, you're doing this. That's not a place where we want kids to be, that lack of trust for the person standing in front of them. And it's not the fault of the person standing in front of them. So LouAnne and I feel really strongly that burnout is not always part of the conversation for educators, because we sort of accepted it as the reality as an institution. And that's great. That's not something that we want kids to be seeing. Teachers can feel that pain, but the second pain point that we'd like to talk about is that lack of clarity. They're not sure what to call it, to name it, or even if it's a thing to be named. It's one of those sort of invisible feelings that a lot of educators are saying, I want something different. I want this to look different, to feel different, to be different, but I have no idea what I want it to look like. That burnout is making it so it's impossible for them to even articulate what the better version of reality looks like. It feels hopeless and beyond their control. They're not sure what it is. So one of the things that life coaching can help with is to bring that clarity, to help them to name it, describe it in a way that's actually actionable, because they're not getting that right now. They might be in that mental spiral of going round and round and round, or saying to people in their lives, I can't do this much longer. This feels unsustainable, but they might not be able to say what about it or what might be changeable, which leads us to our third pain point, which is there's no clear path for improvement across the system. The teacher's not quite sure how to make their own classroom, their own school, their own workday any different than it is, because it feels like so many external factors are influencing it. So they might have ideas for making changes in the system. They might have really great ideas, if only it was like this, but they're not sure how to make them happen. There's not a place to go with those because generally speaking, they're not in control of it. And the other people they're interacting with are experiencing that same level of burnout and lack of clarity and sense of hopelessness. So you can see how these three factors are kind of swirling around in a painful way that makes educators feel like they don't have a way forward. And that then fuels the burnout. So we get into a cycle that is very dysfunctional, and it's happening on stage in front of children. So then the stakes could not be higher for these pain points. LouAnne, is there anything that you'd like to add just from especially your recent experience directly with teachers? I mean, as of 15 minutes ago before we started, probably.
And super briefly, just one quick point. What we're discovering, or what I've rediscovered now coming back in after retiring, is burnout is hitting all levels. And so traditionally as an administrator, I would have enough energy to meet my teachers' needs, to be available to them and to give them the space and time. It is hitting education at all levels now, and the work demand and work level is so intense that the administrators who are traditionally available are not. They have needs as well and don't have the space and time, sadly, always to be available to the teachers as they need and deserve.
Yeah, a great point. And LouAnne's one of her main target coaching client markets is coaches of teachers. So she coaches the coaches because of that lack of feeling of support that they can then, because it's a what's the word I'm looking for, a high leverage to coach the coach, because the coach then interacts with so many teachers. And so we're even finding the helpers of the helpers of the helpers, if we want to keep going, or a target audience that is in real need, but also has a huge influence on the well-being of a school. When those folks aren't well, there's a huge impact. When they are, there's a huge impact. So that's something to keep in mind as well, as the helpers of the helpers can be really an audience that especially is not asking for help, because they are the ones who think that that's what they should be delivering versus receiving. So one of the things that we've been experimenting and using with educators, and it's almost a cliche, so we have to be careful, and you'll have to be careful in how you speak about it with teachers, is this concept of purpose, but bigger than purpose, why you're here, not just as a teacher, but as a human. So LouAnne and I are both huge fans of the Japanese concept of Ikigai, which roughly translates into your reason for being. We like to think of it as why you get up in the morning. Why are you here on earth, and what do you do each day? What are you here for? So our question here is, how might we use this concept of Ikigai to help educators set goals, identify and explore pathways, and develop a sense of agency, those ingredients of hope? Before we start talking about it, though, it might be worth thinking about Ikigai in terms of your own life as a coach and as a human being. So we're going to use this diagram throughout the rest of the presentation, but we wanted to pause here and just give you a moment to sort of think and react to this diagram and the interlapping kind of concepts of passion, mission, profession, vocation, and then those kind of key questions on the outer parts of the circle. So to what extent does Ikigai influence your life? What is your Ikigai is a great question to ask yourself as a coach prior to actually activating that with a coaching client. And I say that to say, when I use this tool in my coaching practice, it's rare. In fact, I'd say I probably have never put it in front of a client and then immediately started asking them questions. Usually it's, we've designed the alliance together, and then I say, here's something that might help you to think about a good topic for our first session. And then when I get to them, they've had some time to think about it, talk about it with somebody, react to it, and then I can ask a good next question at that first session. Because it takes a moment to not only digest the concept, but then also to say, where do I feel good and where do I not feel good in my own life? So I'll stop talking for just a moment. We'll give it maybe a minute or two. And if you have any questions or reactions to it, feel free to put those in the chat. But let's just think about this in terms of our own life, not as a coach, but as a human. So one of the things that I like about this particular illustration of Ikigai is you can ask a person, what's your reason for being? Good, big, huge, powerful question, but it's not a super actionable, I can find an answer to that question. And I might be tempted to say something that sounds like a sales pitch or a little brief bit. But if I start thinking about things I can be paid for that the world needs, the concept of vocation that says I can be paid for things that help the world, that's a little bit of a bigger concept. And then I can also look at this and say, if I'm doing things I can be paid for that the world needs, but I don't like them, what does that cost me as a human? What is that doing to my day? So then I add that layer of things I love to it. And now it's things I love that the world needs that I can be paid for. And that might feel really good and I might have some harmony there. But then it turns out in that space that I'm in where I can be paid for, the world needs it. I love it, but I don't have the skills yet to make it happen. I'm not very good at it. So now I can start addressing that particular part of the diagram where maybe I need to enroll in a training program or something like that to start building up my skill set so I can be good at the thing I'm paid for. Now people want to start paying me more for it and I'm professionalizing myself. So there's some subtlety to the way these overlap that can lead to lots of good questions and lots of good discovery for the client that we as the coach don't need to force them through. So we like to think of it almost as like a lens through which you view your world. And we're going to kind of do that today and break down the parts in some questioning to think about how we might use this Ikigai concept specifically for educators, specifically so that they can set goals and explore multiple pathways to meet those goals so that they feel that sense of agency, that sense of I'm actually in control of my vocation, my profession, the things the world needs, what I can be paid for. in a way that they're just not currently accessing. So we're going to start with, why is that going backwards? Sorry. We'll try another method. Some of these kind of anchor questions as we go through. So the first part of that diagram has just the big labeled words in the overlap sections. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how educators are sort of viewing these right now. And then we'll play around with just thinking about what are some tools and strategies we can use that we already have in our toolkit to help educators with this particular concept. So the first one for finding pathways to go forward is this sense of mission. And you might think, educators, they went into education, so they have a mission. They want to help kids. That's why they got there. Maybe educators do often feel confident about their mission, but when they really think about how often they feel connected to their mission and their ability to execute it, there's a pain point there. So an educator might tell you, you might have them in your lives. I'm grading papers all the time. This is not why I got into education. I am dealing with behavior problems. This is not why I got into education. So when an educator is feeling kind of drowned by the expectations of the job, they can lose their sense of mission or their connection to their ability to execute their mission. So we were kind of thinking about some tools here that can help an educator access their mission again and think about how they're able to connect to it on the day-to-day and be in more control of it. So I'm going to ask if anybody can think of a tool that's in their toolkit that would maybe help with this particular problem, your sense of connection to your mission. And I know LouAnne and I kind of did a little brainstorming ahead of time so we can help out as we go through. LouAnne, do you want to share one that you're thinking of goes there?
Sure. I'm thinking about the values tool that we use in CTEDU as well as the visioning tool. Those two in particular. Another one could be perspectives and assumptions.
Yeah. Especially as we go through those day-to-day activities with a reframe, a lot of times those day-to-day activities can feel more mission focused if we're able to connect them to that bigger why. So that's a really good point. Another one that sounds like it would be really good, but is maybe more of a cap at the end of some exploration of Ikigai is that mission statement. Being able to actually say, here is my mission. It's likely that an educator can't do that at first, but it might be a long-term goal of working with somebody for a while to say, let's work through this until we can get that mission statement. And then maybe it's sort of a mantra you can use to see, is this in alignment with my mission statement? Why does that matter? What am I going to do about it? What quantity of time am I spending connected to my mission? The next one is passion. And passion is something that doesn't just happen within your professional life. Passion is outside of that as well. So educators, like anyone, have passions in their personal and their professional lives, but they're often ignored when life gets difficult. Like anybody else, your passion is one of the first things to go when times get tough. So educators are sometimes out of touch with their passions or not able to allocate the time and attention to them that they want to. So when life gets difficult, passions go, then the fuel that comes back into your work life is gone, and passion is a fuel. So tools that can help with passion could be things like helping them to set a reminder to take a break, thinking about how they can carve out time on their calendar before the week begins, systems to make sure that time is allocated for passion, and then reflecting back through a coaching session. What was different about your week because you made time for your passion? And that can really help an educator who is not in touch with how little they're connecting to their passion and how much that's impacting their life. Some of our most profound changes with coaching clients have been people saying, I'm thinking of a client you had, LouAnne, where it was, I started taking a walk or I started spending time with my husband more and having conversations. And then I was better in the following ways as a result.
Yeah. So Megan, I also think about bird's eye view, because sometimes pulling back and looking down on your life from that higher perspective also brings educators and clients to a point where they recognize what's missing or what's not happening. And another one that I learned in 2.0 that I really enjoyed, so I encourage you guys to explore it, is internal family systems. And it's where you start to help the individual describe that feeling, that energy, that turn it into an object, turn it into something that they can get their hands around, and then talk about the relationship they want to develop with it, and how they're going to handle it when times do get difficult, or how they're going to stay in a more positive sense so that the difficulties don't happen. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And one overlap that doesn't occur on the diagram that we have for Ikigai, but one that matters is the overlap between passion and vocation. So that this idea that educators have kind of lost their sense of vocation, what the world needs and what I'm paid for societally is at a disconnect. What we pay teachers and how badly they're needed is not in alignment. We know this about many of our helping professions. And that sense of dwindling vocation, that idea that the world needs me and I'm being compensated fairly as a value can be really, really disheartening for teachers because they are not in control of that in many ways. But passion is a place where we might be able to say, how could you feel more in touch with your vocation by exercising your passion in your job? So, yes, it's that external, but it's also that, do you care really deeply about children's literature? If you're a high school teacher, is activism important to you? Do you really like environmental issues? And how can you do some of that job crafting that makes it feel like your passion is part of your workday? So those overlaps can really be a great place to start exploring with people, and tools that help you to do that, or even just really good questions, which we'll get to in a few moments, can be helpful there too. The last one is the profession, which of course you would think would be the most obvious one that we would talk about here, but actually is often the last one that teachers pull out as what stands out to them in the Ikigai. But education as a profession, what we're paid for and what people are good at, that idea of expertise, is in crisis. And many educators are feeling this sense of challenge, isolation, loneliness. I've worked on this skill set and that skill set is not addressing the needs right now. Or I'm really good at this, but it doesn't really seem to matter all that much. That sort of existential crisis is real, but it's also very isolating. So one of the things that we can do as coaches, and what we can do as like the collective of coaches, is to help people know they're not alone. Those are not uncommon feelings. Those are not things that they're experiencing that no one else is. And that sense of camaraderie can be really powerful for a teacher to know that they are not the only one, and that there are things that they can do together to help the profession, which is a lot of times what a helper wants to do. How can you actually move the needle forward on making that not happen for other people in the profession? So sometimes that's an access point as well.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that, LouAnne?
Just real briefly, I also think about for vocation and profession, what I've often found is the wheel is one of the first times that clients will go, oh, I'm not as satisfied with this area of my life as I thought. And it's the first realization. And then the other strategy that I had found to be helpful in both of those areas, and actually any of them, but especially vocation and profession, is brainstorming. As easy as that is, it starts to open their eyes. And I had a client that absolutely thought she no longer wanted to stay in the profession she was in. And we started exploring, and the way I could support her was to have her speak with a friend of mine about other job opportunities. And that's all it took for her to realize, no, her passion still is in this field, and that's not where I want to go. But just taking those courageous steps is sometimes really help with bringing the clarity into focus.
Yeah. Yeah, and a really good point, LouAnne, about the wheel. It's probably our power tool. We've used it even in workshop formats with educators, and we've done a couple of different things, LouAnne and I and some of our other colleagues, with a wheel that's about your whole life and the pieces along the way, a wheel that's specifically to education, your job as a teacher. What are the different pieces of the pie, and to what extent do you feel satisfied with those? But a lot of times that's a tool that we do once and hand to the person, and they'll tell us 4 or 5 sessions down the line. I was thinking about this when I did my wheel again the other day. So they're very driven to go back to that tool. It's a simple one, but one that definitely has a huge impact to kind of zoom back and say, to what extent am I satisfied? What does that mean? How do these play off of each other? How, when this one's high, this one's low, and what do I want to do about that? All of those kinds of questions tend to be really important ones for educators. to feel that sense of agency, that they actually can do something about it. So one of the things that we wanted to just take a moment to do is to just idea dump for you yourself, whether you're watching this or if you're here right now. What are you learning about educators that could be useful in your practice? And we ask this to think now back to that first question. You as a coach, we're talking about educators. Maybe this is new information you've not heard before, but what do you already do or know as a coach that is related to this sense of pain point, these tools we're talking about that could be useful in your practice? So take a moment to just reflect, think. I personally will always write down or that idea, boop, right out of my head. So you might want to take a moment to scratch a little notes down to say, how might you use this information in your coaching practice? And we'll just wait for the timer to run down so that we practice that wait time, reflective time that we know is so important and we both struggle to sometimes provide. So we put that timer there to make ourselves. Before we move on to our kind of next nuts and bolts section, just one thing that LouAnne and I feel very strongly about, and part of the reason we've structured this whole talk this way is that this is not a competitive space. This is an all hands on deck kind of a space. We firmly believe that school systems, whether that's universities or public schools or homeschools or private schools or any kind of way that children are educated, they're not going to be able to survive just with their own resources internally. This is an everybody problem and an everybody challenge. And so part of what we're hoping that you're thinking about as an educator or as a coach is, how is this something I can help with? How is this connected to my Ikigai and what I'm already doing? And what are some small things that I can do as a coach to be useful moving forward to help people? And that might be taking on some educator clients and kind of pivoting some of your client base, or it could simply be seeing an educator in your life and saying, I'm sure this is something that's difficult for you. How are you doing? It's small moves as well as big ones. So as we kind of continue on, that's something we'd really like for people to think about, is this general idea of sustainability, meeting the needs of current generations without compromising the needs of future generations. It's not a school problem. It is something that schools are constantly addressing, but this is a collective societal responsibility across cultures. In any place where people care about what happens next, we all need to be thinking about this with a sustainability mindset. So LouAnne's going to kind of take over with some ideas about powerful questions that you might be able to use in your coaching practice, specifically working with educators.
Yeah, totally believe the challenges educators are facing now are surmountable when given space and time to dream and process and plan. And two of the most important tools a coach has in their arsenal is level 2 listening and powerful questions. And we know what makes a powerful question: 7 to 10 words, questions that begin with what, how, why, and emerge as a result of our curiosity. And generally questions where there are no right or wrong answers. And I want to give you a heads up again about educators will be uncomfortable with these questions. Why? Because we've been trained since we were 5 years old, there is a right answer. And so they will want to give you, they will search and search for the right answer. My biggest piece of advice is to build into your design the alliance of something about your questioning style. And, we know this warrior savior type educator really is not sustainable, and it's not what's needed right now, nor is it right for educators. So really lean into the learning and being, and educators especially will love this once they feel safe and they know they will not be judged. And I'm convinced this kind of coaching will help schools create environments that educators will love to do what they do and will share their passion about their work because they're empowered by you as a powerful coach. So as we go to the next area, what we're going to invite you to do is to consider the areas of the Ikigai. And these are the things that may come about in your conversation, in your coaching conversations. And As a coach, you are lending or you are inspiring hope. And that's what educators need right now. And so we're going to give you a couple of minutes to take a look at each of the areas and just jot in the chat powerful questions that you think might help a client who's struggling with areas that they could, things that they could do to be paid for, or things they're good at, or what the world needs right now. And what we'll do at the end is we'll pull these questions together and share them with you. They'll be emailed to you. So this will be a code-generated piece. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to do that if you don't mind right now.
I'll share some of these out loud as they come up too, just for the folks that are watching the recording. So one question is, what do you need to let go of? And I think that fits into quite a few of these categories, because sometimes when your plate is full, if you pull some things back, the plate can fill back up again in the way you want it to. So those are the types of open-ended questions. What causes you to love something? One question, what is the connection between the head and the heart? That one takes a pause for the person to figure out, what does that mean? And what does that mean to me? But it's one of those questions that's totally worth asking. What is your relationship with control? That's a whole type of educator that needs that question repeated probably 4 or 5 times in a session. And I do too. I'm that type, in case you're wondering. I know one that somebody in my cohort of Coach Training EDU and my 1.0 asked me was about, what do people come to me for advice? And that was a really helpful question, not only in the moment, but then thinking about it moving forward, because the things that I discovered that people were coming to me for were not things that I would have labeled as strengths. So that was a really helpful question too. Yeah, nice future self-oriented question. Who will you become if you're living out your passion?
Mm-hmm.
Living out your passion is in control of something most people can do if they make some choices. So I think that's something that they can see as an alternative to the current reality. Yeah, these are questions that to put in our arsenal, to have nearby, to be thinking about, not just with educators, but with anybody. The Ikigai is a really good trigger point for people to find those questions and to start to think about what's most important to explore. But these are things that we'll share back to the group, and hopefully you'll start to think of questions that fit into these categories over time as well. So one of the things that we wanted to just mention was when and how you might use these questions in a coaching session. I'd like LouAnne to definitely share this too, but one thing that I will definitely say is the Ikigai finds its way into multiple parts of the coaching session for me. So LouAnne, do you want to share a little bit about when and where you use these kinds of Ikigai-based questions? And then I'll just hop on top if there's anything you don't say that is related to my experience.
Yeah, it just comes up organically. It really depends on what they're wrestling with. And if they're starting to wrestle with, I just feel like I'm not enough. Those are some of the words that I hear. I'm not sure this is the field for me. Those are some of the cues that tell me this might be a good conversation or pathway to go down. Trying to think what else I often hear. Mostly it's around enough. I just don't know if I have the energy to do this job.
Yeah, and that's a good time to sort of, if you've already used the tool, bring it back up and say, let's remind ourselves. I also find that it's when the client is struggling with a topic for the day session, like there's just so much going on, I'm not sure what to talk about. We can hold up the Ikigai and say, what stands out for you? An open-ended question like that, or a more directed, what is a pain point for you right now? Where are you feeling really good right now? Those can generate topics that then can lead you into that time process, that, kind of process of identifying goals for the session and checking back in at the end.
So as we start to come to a close here, we just want to thank you, first of all, for being here and for being interested in coaching educators. Your sphere of influence is so much greater than I think we realize. And when I think about where are educators? They are absolutely everywhere. When I think about this, I think about my neighbors. They have children in elementary school, they have children in high school, they have children in community colleges, and they have children in universities. And so just a conversation over the fence leads to this is what I do, and this is how I would like to help. And that's a link to an educator that would love this kind of support. Also, I think about schools and just having a conversation. Sometimes tough to get it into administrators, but if you know a teacher in that school and or the PTA, the parents that are in that school, or the school counselor, often they will have direct connections to ways for you to provide support. And you may, I would highly encourage you to do a presentation. That is one way for educators to say, oh, wow, that was really inspiring, and I would like to work with that person. Educators don't realize this is out there and this is available. And as a reminder, they're used to a different style. They're used to someone telling them what to do and judging what they're doing. So this would be really powerful in their world and in their lives. Um, and I just think about, that ultimately what we're doing is improving student achievement. You're helping the world, expanding human potential and the equity for a much, much better future for everyone. And so use your social media, reach out to that, explore your Ikigai and why and what could lead to this, so that we can build greater health and well-being for all of our educators.
And one thing I'll point out too, as this a former school community partnerships coordinator, there were always people who wanted to give to a school. And sometimes it can actually be a little overwhelming, all the things that come in with people saying they want to help. But one of the things that we found some success with, a teacher will rarely say, I need coaching, but they will say, my friend needs coaching. They will say, I know someone who. So with these networks of neighbors and schools and social media, one thing you might consider is saying to people, do you know someone who could use the gift of coaching? And think of it as a pay it forward versus a do you need this? And you'll find the helpers will do that for each other much more than they'll do it for themselves. So just as a quick little recap here at the end, as we get to the end, LouAnne and I found each other in our professional lives through an organization that we're both part of called Adjacent, which is an educator design collaborative. And really our mission is to create content and community and coaching that helps to lead to transformation for educators. So not for education, although by extension that may happen. We're specifically focused on the actual first responders who are at the front of the line. So if you ever have any curiosity about how to do that, where to do that, you can find us at adjacent.org. Of course, we'll be sharing contact information, but this is what we care deeply about. And it's not our day job. It is our passion. It is our Ikigai and kind of what we think is the most important way that our coaching practice can help the world. So it's a place where you can learn about what educators need and want. And it's a place where you can see kind of what we're putting out into the world for those educators. So as an ending, our last question for you to consider as you're leaving is, why do educators need you as their coach so they can meet the needs of the current generation without compromising the needs of future generations? We really believe that there are a lot of people in this world who could be helping and supporting educators in this work because we all care about it. And that means you as a coach, a person who's training in this skill set, can be incredibly useful to the educators in your sphere. And so we hope that you're thinking just a little bit differently about how your skill set aligns to this challenge that is never not going to be a challenge for our society. Yes, there are things that are common to this time in this place, but this will always be a burning question for society. So your usefulness in this area is enduring, it's timeless. And we hope that you're seeing a little bit of that agency as well. I'm going to share over on the chat side too, mine and LouAnne's, my and that as a teacher, right? our email addresses, and you're welcome to reach out to us and just say, I don't know what I want to say. I just want to talk. Or please help me with this, or tell me more about how Jason addresses these needs, like kind of more systematically. We're happy to answer coaching business questions. We both have one, and then we connect with each other. So there are all kinds of things that we might be able to help and support, or even just listen and reflect back to you in any way that you can think of. So please do reach out. We love those kinds of conversations. They're our favorite. So
We're so grateful for you and so excited for the continued ripple effect that it's going to have. So thank you for taking time today. Again, yeah, connect with them. This will be on the blog as well. So if you come up with any more questions that they had asked for today, if there's anything that comes up, share with our team because we'll add that to the blog as well, to be able to share with others that are going to listen to the recording and read the blog. Thank you all so much for being here. We're so grateful for this community. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And hopefully we'll see you at the next workshop. Keep your eye out for those as well. So thank you all so much.